Seconda categoria sociale. Su questa categoria abbiamo 2 premiati. Benvenuti.
Grazie mille dell'invito e del premio.
Ce lo racconti su Gerardo di arte?
Sì, di arte nasce
Ehi, impara dal passato. Decidi dove andare. Apri quella porta. Accendi il tuo motore. Allaccia la cintura. Stringiti al volante. E vieni via con me.
Investiamo nel presente, prima raggiungiamo il futuro. Questa è l'idea che ci spinge ogni giorno a muovere il nostro paese verso la ripresa, a dare a tutti nuovi percorsi da seguire, a usare l'innovazione per essere più liberi di crescere, a esportare la nostra eccellenza italiana nel mondo, ad anticipare i cambiamenti per costruire un domani più sostenibile con tutti voi. Perché il futuro è la nostra destinazione, solo se è un viaggio che facciamo insieme.
Sociale. Su questa categoria abbiamo 2 premiati. Benvenuti.
grazie mille dell'invito e del premio.
Ce lo racconti su Gerardo di arte?
Sì, di arte nasce
Impara dal passato. Decidi dove andare. Apri quella porta. Accendi il tuo motore. Allaccia la cintura. Stringiti al volante. E vieni via con me.
Investiamo nel presente, prima raggiungiamo il futuro. Questa è l'idea che ci spinge ogni giorno a muovere il nostro paese verso la ripresa, a dare a tutti nuovi percorsi da seguire, a usare l'innovazione per essere più liberi di crescere, a esportare la nostra eccellenza italiana nel mondo, ad anticipare i cambiamenti per costruire un domani più sostenibile con tutti voi. Perché il futuro è la nostra destinazione, solo se è un viaggio che facciamo insieme.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second meeting with the title Transition, the Ecological Transition. And we're going to talk about the electric vector. It's a topic with respect to hydrogen, which was what we discussed yesterday. It's in common with hybrid and fully electric mobility that is taking place in our country, but with some very challenging objectives. And Europe itself set some goals that are very important and need to go through a path. And we have some very important deadlines. It's clear that this transition requires a technological path, some changes in the culture that we have, the evolution of a product and services. Today, with our guests, we would like to tackle this topic. And for Europeans, this might sound easy to do, but it's true that Europe is contributing to the emission of CO2. There are big groups for oil that are investing in the plants, and therefore it seems that it's quite useless to make the effort we're trying to make. But I think that it's more of a cultural change, give some directions so that we can start walking along this path. The first guest is Mr. Capozza, which is the General Secretary of ACI, that has been working for over 100 years and has several millions of associates and members. And the last 50 years, they showed that a car is a symbol of freedom, not only for a general purpose to do everyday tasks. We are changing the use of the car in the city because we need to use it the least possible and use it only for long travels. And this is going to be a big change in the culture and the mindset of their members. So what are the ideas that you have and the things they are doing for this? So thank you very much for let us be here, inviting us here so that we can express our opinions. And to break the ice, I can say that we have more than 1 million members, but we have 17 million customers. So you can understand that our role in our institutional task, because we are a public body, we have also a social task that is dealing with the ecological transition. We have an important role to play. We feel the responsibility we have. And in fact, in 2018, we had a big national initiative with the Foundation Carracciolo, and together with Enea and the CNR, we put forward some studies and made them available to the different institutions. And the European Commission and the European Parliament supplied some deadlines, 2030 and 2035. So in 2030, we should have 55% of cars being electric, and while in 2035, 100% of the cars should be electric. So we need to change the culture, the mindset, the tools that we have in our hands. Cars, they are totally different from what we used to have. Consumption is different, so the different problems connected with the type of consumption they have. And this is something I would like to talk about with the Vice Minister, who is the public body that we need to work with. So we need to take into consideration the social aspect, first of all, because if we were to supply electric cars to all citizens, maybe less than 10% of the Italian citizens will be able to buy it, to afford it. And others would have to tackle the limitations of movement because you know that these cars can run for up to 100, up maximum to 300 kilometers. So they are no longer simply city cars, but they also have a problem not only dealing with the batteries, but also with the networks, the grids, because we have all the works being done. Enel has started working on the network to supply the recharging points. And this implies that there are a lot of investments to do. And then we have on the other side industry and all the manufacturers that need to adapt to this new situation. And therefore, if we want to be fair and respect a big part of our population, we need to really take the word ecological transition by its own meaning. So the transition means that you need to go through different steps. I do understand the European legislator that if you don't set a deadline, then you never start talking about this topic. But I think that it would be fair that the government, and I think that the entire government is working well in this direction. We need to help the companies, the enterprises to keep up with the developments, but we need to bear in mind also the citizens. So let's say that ACI is taking into consideration both sides because we deal with mobility, but we represent also the car manufacturers, the Italian car manufacturers. And we need to become some kind of a mediator, or actually be a support to both sides, because we need to be a support to the institutions because we are a public body. And therefore, based on the opinions of the president of ACI or other, but actually listening to the studies and the scientists and talk together with big companies, car companies like Toyota, which is really advanced in their studies, but also all the other stakeholders, so that we have a clear idea, and therefore that we can really give you indications. Up to date, we have about 21 million polluting cars, which extremely polluting cars, so Euro 0 and Euro 1 cars. And we talked to the government, and we suggested to not only give incentives for the electric cars, but due to the results of our studies, up to 2030, we might be able to have 30% of the cars being electric, which is quite different from the percentage given by the European Union, which is 55%. So this implies that we need to put together several things. So our idea is that we should give incentives to change the most polluting cars like Euro 1, Euro 0 cars that account for about 21 million items. And there we should give incentives for the new cars that are less polluting, for the e-cars and so on. And we can give the technical and scientific support mainly to the Ministry of Infrastructures, and we collaborate on different topics. So let's say that we should change and give incentives to change the old cars that are Euro 5, Euro 6, but they are standing still in the car parks of big companies or leasing or renting companies. And therefore, we need to try and resell those cars so that they're getting used. So that being used, they cost less, and therefore citizens can afford this, let's say, less polluting cars. One more thing that we need to add to this is that today a second-generation diesel car is polluting as much of an e-car with fewer costs concerning maintenance and purchase. And one more thing that it's underestimated, and we don't talk about this, it's the recycling, or in any case, the disposal of batteries. If we want to have an ecological transition, it needs to look at the closed cycle, the loop from production, usage, and once it has finished its function, it needs to be reused somehow. This way, we will be able to achieve the objective that we are trying to achieve, what is the real respect of ecology. So this is a substantial aspect to which Archie is going to contribute as much as possible with technical suggestions that sometimes are not mentioned. Thank you. And we understand that the topic is becoming more and more difficult because there are several aspects that are not so easily understandable and that we cannot take for granted. And the industry is trying to do is to explain and make people understand the importance of such a transition. And again, the topic here is important. I would like to introduce Mr. Costa, who is the General Director of Areva Italia, who is a European stakeholder for passenger transport. So we go from cars to coaches and public transport. And they recently had a project in Cremona, so with a fleet of electric buses. And we need to add that this is just a first idea to share some data and see how to introduce a mixture of a fleet, which is a first step to achieve the sustainability that is important for a player like Areva, and it's a challenge for them they need to tackle. So I would like you to invite you to tell us about this episode and to tell us a little bit the ideas behind this example. So thank you very much for your invitation. Coming here to the meeting is a very important chance to dialogue, to share views and news perspectives. As the operator of the sector, the ecological transition is an essential topic, and this is a process that we are developing together with the local administrations. Often, this idea of economic transition is restricted only to the purchase of e-cars or e-vehicles. But when we're talking about the transition towards the electric system, there are several aspects to take into consideration. There is an issue dealing with the fleet, an issue with the deposit, and other operational aspects that we need to take into consideration. And this is affecting the approach and it's changing a lot the way we work. As for the passengers, the impact is not so important, but I think that the most important aspect is actually what we lived through COVID. the local public transport is an important player in the transport of people in our towns. And I think it's very important to understand that the spreading of local public transport is extremely important for the towns, for accessibility to services, for safety in the towns. There is an American study where it is shown that there is a direct connection between an employment rate with public local transport. So having the service offered growing, therefore you have larger numbers of people accessing their employment and their jobs. This transition dealing with the energy sector needs to be connected to a keyword that sometimes it's not used. The word is redistribution. Rather than looking at it as something that distributing from those who have more to those who have less, it's actually dealing with the spreading of these aspects. I think that financing the local public transport system is the most efficient way to finance such a transition. And I would like to give a concrete example dealing with an average town like Trieste, for example, making, let's say, rough calculations, we could say that with financing of 100 million euros, we could realize a full electric transport system for a time the size of Trieste. And we are talking about a reality where we have about 120,000 people using the public transport system. So such an amount would let's say, finance the replacement of the fleet, of most of the fleet, with the electric vehicles. And this would have an impact on the local collectivity, on the local people. And one of the objectives, or in any case, one way to achieve this transition is going through regulation. And I take advantage of the presence of our Vice Minister, because regulation is extremely important for us, for what we do, for how financing is given, and the role of the public administration as the purchaser of the services. And it's really important for the objectives that we want to achieve, and therefore we need to have the economic resources in order to achieve such goals. I've seen in my experience some examples where we had some public calls where the objective of the transition was based mainly on competition, which is not so important actually for the public authority. And I would like to give an example. If within a public call, the winner is the renewal of a fleet before the starting of a contract, how can this be coherent with the incentives given for the renewal of such fleet, which is seen over the next 10 years? So there is a kind of misunderstanding in terms here. So I think that this is very important to understand. I think that we have room to and time to achieve the objectives we set, but we need to have all the players involved so that we can actually achieve such goals. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Viano, who is the leader of Leaseplan, the CEO of Leaseplan, it's one of the key player of long-term rental. So it's slightly separated from the type of car, so the hardware part. It's a financial company that is, let's say, helping mobility. It's a pay-per-use for the users. And it's very important, their contribution to the ecological transition, and they are proposing the incentives for the purchase of a hybrid cars. So we're talking about the costs of this technology, but also we have the residual value to take into account because we don't have enough data to understand the real impact and the real consequences. So we said that this is a choice supported by an economic criterion, so a fleet that is a mixture, and it's an economic choice made by the company, and it's also a commitment of the company to really achieve the objective of 2030, where we have only hybrid cars being matriculated, and therefore, how can you contribute to this transition? So thank you very much, and a lot of ideas coming from the previous intervention. I'm going home with interesting ideas. As we said, that we are one of the first, but we are no longer alone. We are maybe the biggest. We are a very important reality. In Italy, we play a key role. So we have very positive piece of news for our group. So we have a worldwide renowned company that has a very key role to play in Italy. So as we said, that the idea is to have only hybrid or electric cars by 2030 being registered, but we cannot say that we know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but we can see that there is a process going on, and we can understand that we are going into this direction. And this is due to rational and concrete aspects, but also for emotional aspects. Because if we look at what happens when we are discussing about reducing or making, let's say, easing the parameters for gas emission or pollution, it's true that we heard that CO2 is not a polluting agent, but it's actually changing the climate. And we noticed that by changing this climate, we are really affecting the reaction of the citizens. And we can say that the European Commission has been more rigid on applying this regulation on reduction of CO2 emissions. So let's say that if it's true that this technology was, let's say, less advanced than hydrogen cars, but it's true that nowadays everyone has electric vehicles in their fleet. So from the industrial point of view, the electric cars are already there. The electric vehicles are there. But on the Italian market, replacing cars, it's a problem. Because where are all the replaced cars going? It's true that there is a very big sensitivity about the batteries, recycling batteries from a technological point of view. It has already been solved, but economically speaking, this is still a problem because it's still too expensive. There is a startup in California that is processing the, let's say, the residual energy in the batteries, but at the same time, the battery it's a closed box. The elements inside are not lost during its use, but extracting those elements nowadays is more expensive than the rare, let's say, elements from the mines. And the effective cost, the real cost of an electric car, let's say the price list in a car dealer says that it's slightly more expensive than the old-fashioned cars. But the electric cars should reduce their price in the future because it's a much more simple object. Let's say that at the moment the cost is $130 per kilowatt hour in production. But we should be able to reach an amount of less than $100 per kilowatt hour. So this means that there is a reduction of more than 30% in its price for the production. So as a consequence, the price of the car will be reduced. But in addition, this is going to have a less important impact in general. The consumption of energy by an e-car is, let's say, a lot more efficient than a regular car. And for example, I've come by car and I didn't stop from Milan, so the car is extremely efficient, and 100 kilowatt hour corresponds about at 15 liters of petrol. Let's say that you do not use 15 liters of petrol to come from Milan to Rimini. The second element is that the higher efficiency is given on one side from the cost, and on the other is the use. Let's say that the more we use the e-car, the less it costs. And then, final one, we can transform an e-car into a usership type of cost. This means that you no longer need to buy the car, but you buy the use of the car. So it's true that the investment might be higher, but the use investment is going to be lower. So this is important because this is going to affect the usage cost that is lower because you no longer have the maintenance costs. And let's say that even today, the e-cars are more competitive than the combustion cars, so the regular cars, if we look at the long-term rental type of contract. And if we look at the autonomy and if we look at the service that we have along the highways, for example, let's say that for the regular cars, we have plenty of petrol and diesel pumps along the highway as well as in the regular roads. But for e-cars, the charging station is very difficult to find. We haven't got too many. So this means that we need to have a lot of more charging stations, let's say at least 21,000 all over the country, and this could be comparable to the presence of the regular petrol stations. So for those who travel quite often between Milan and Genoa or Milan and Bologna, if we all had, for example, on the direction to Genoa, there is a tunnel. If we all had an electric car, you can imagine that in that tunnel, the air will be, let's say, more breathable and life would be much better there. So let's say that we should look also at the byproducts of regular cars. For example, if you look at the tires, when you want to deflate a tire from a regular car, you have, when you release air from there, you have a lot of particulates together with the air coming out, while with the electric car, we don't have all of that. So let's say that it's true that we are in the area where we have a lot of manufacturers of internal combustion engines, so it's quite difficult to discuss about this topic here. I think that that also the details supplied during this talk so that we can really emphasize the importance of using the electrical engine. And I would like to take advantage from Dr. Viano's words to introduce our guest who is connected online. It's Mr. Moroni, who is the CEO of Free2X, which is a company of the Autostrade Group, and is mainly focusing on infrastructure, long-distance infrastructure. And as Mr. Viano said, he came from Milan, and we need to change the use of a car and the relationship with the car, the autonomy of a car. So we know that I have a lot of people that once they have already used half of the tank, they start refilling the tank, and therefore we need to really trust that the figure that we see on the dashboard will allow us to reach our final destination. So let's say that one slogan is that the important thing is not the destination, is actually the travel. So you are introducing difference in geography in Italy and in Europe as well. We all know that we need to have more employment in the public transport, but we also need recharging stations, more recharging stations spread around our territory. So I would like you to help us understand what's going to happen in the next few years.
Good morning, and thanks for this invitation. It's very interesting what has been said so far, and it explains how we see differently the growing rate. It's true that the European Union set some very important goals, but it's true as well that the pandemic is teaching us that some changes may be very, very quick, very, very fast, and become something normal. So it's true that we're talking about what, in my opinion, is the clear example of the reason why we focused on the Italian law, Italian regulation based on the European regulation, which set some clear goals, which was to create charging stations for the long journeys, the long trips. Even though we have to consider the fact that there are many commuters going through the highways, and that creates, and there is also the heavy traffic to be considered. But the charging stations were the real challenge to face. As it's already been said, 5 years ago we were not even certain about the fact that the electric could have become a new standard, while today all the car manufacturers are investing on e-cars, aiming at providing capacities and autonomies that will allow people to commute and to have long trips as well, long journeys with e-cars. So we focused on this scenario, and we are aiming at, let's say, 2030 to have a 50-60 kilometers distance, which is the goal that the European Union is setting for all the highway networks. So we will achieve that within 2033, a network with, 2023, a network aiming at reducing the distance between the charging stations. So starting from the north to the south of Italy, we will try to achieve this goal. Of course, we are already working in order to achieve the goal of 100 within 2023. We already started some months ago at the beginning of this year, and we already presented 70 projects with several local bodies aiming at providing charging stations with 300 kilowatts. So, of course, this deserves all a series of infrastructures and elements which will play a key role. Of course, we need to consider green energy production in order to feed these charging networks. And as I said, we already launched 70 projects, and within the month of September, we aim at finalizing many of these projects. We already signed an agreement with the energy suppliers, and within next year, we aim at achieving between 40 and 50 charging stations. And within this year, we aim at achieving at least 10 charging stations. So it's not always very easy, of course. It's very challenging. There are several different aspects to be considered, from the environment, from the context in which we are working, the landscape. And of course, there are also different kind of problems and challenges to be considered. But we really believe that this is a goal that we can achieve in order also to provide a solution to the new market needs and to the e-car markets. So we will provide stations for 300 kilowatts within about 10 minutes. So in the past, if we consider the journey Rome to Milan, from Rome to Milan, it would have taken much more time. While we believe that relying on this technology now, we can also reduce the range anxiety, as it has been called. So the anxiety to finish the available electricity of your e-car. So we believe that thanks to these technologies and these investments, we can actually achieve this goal. This will be a neutral infrastructure, and we really believe that this will be a further step forward in order to achieve the growth of this sector, which, as it has been said many times already, this is the road, this is the direction where we shall lead. So it's time now to act in this direction in our country. Thank you. Let's now leave the floor to Alessandro Morelli, Vice Minister of Sustainable Infrastructures and Mobility. We know that there is an important aspect played by the users as well, allowing the possibility to replace the cars of end users. We also see the position of the market operators, which is quickly going towards this direction because they really believe in this aspect. They are changing their companies, and there are new solutions and opportunities being developed. So as it has been said already, institutions play a key role because this change shall, of course, involve the entire supply chain from the manufacturers to the end users, being able to exploit all those news that technology and markets are providing today, which actually make choices more and more important to consider what's going on, and also considering the real possibility of citizens. So I kindly ask you, what are the strategic guidelines from the government and what the government will do in order to support this development? Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be here and to talk about electrics. Today, talking about e-cars, talking about transports, it's very cool, we can say. It's a fashion. But being able to organize a meeting like that with people going deep into details about this topic and not only just saying that this is something interesting, well, that allows us to share ideas and also to add somehow what may be the most critical points, the most challenging aspects, which have already been mentioned during this panel. So thank you for this opportunity, first of all. I really love the e-cars and the electrics, and I'm supporting that as a private citizen. But I think that e-cars should be used where they are actually useful, because we are talking about mobility here. We heard some representatives of ACI or some representatives of very important multinational companies dealing with mass mobility or also with the leasing management. So big companies working in very important fields and sectors of our economy, which are, however, a part of our economy, because we need to consider that the heavy transport plays a key role as well, because the majority of the goods that we find in our supermarkets, for example, the tuna that Miss Maria can buy in our supermarket is actually transported with traditional engine vehicles. This is the reality we have right nowadays, but it's true as well that today we need to look at the future. So your question is a very good question. So what does the government want to do, the Draghi government want to do? As far as this very important topic is concerned, so today we already mentioned some aspects, some figures have, as well have been shared. So, for example, the very important investments, and talking about 2 billion euros of investments for the replacement of the cars in the big cities and for public transport, for the fleet of public transports. Furthermore, very important investments for the transition of ships as well. Let's just imagine, as a private citizens, without talking about figures, let's just imagine how polluting is a cruise ship in whatever port in Italy. So our wish, of course, is to see more and more cruise ships in our ports. So at that point, you perfectly understand what we're talking about. So the European figures are very, very challenging, but the European figures, the European data shall be considered also from our own point of view, because of course the European Union is setting the way, the direction, which is our goal, but we also need to consider our local seat context, as the ACI representative was saying. For whatever reason, which there are several aspects linked to our culture, to our economy. Italy, together with a few other countries, Portugal, Spain, for example, is one of the few countries relying on the oldest car fleet. So starting this transition is fundamental if we talk about this topic. But as you said correctly at the beginning, you said transition, because transition is a key word. We need to talk about transition today. And transition takes place when there are a series of balanced deadlines which can match social aspects, economic aspects, and industrial aspects as well. Because sometimes the industrial timing is linked to the technical aspect. And today, it's been said how the technical aspect already achieved very important goals in terms of technology, even though there are still important steps forwards being made in terms of batteries, as it's been said. But we all know that in the next few years, the price of battery will be reduced by 30%, but at the same time, unfortunately, the price of raw materials for the battery production is linked to some exploitation systems. We all know what's happening in Afghanistan in this very moment, and reading the newspapers, we realize now that one of the reasons why one of the biggest countries in the world, so China, is interested in helping Afghanistan is not actually saving the people living in Afghanistan, but one of the main goals of the Chinese government is to exploit the rare earths of which Afghanistan is rich. So we need to find a balanced way to achieve these goals, because of course we want to play an important role at the European level, because Europe aims at very important goals from several different points of view. And I'm proud to be Italian. I'm proud to be European, of course. Because if we consider, for example, the health system, we can rely on a public health system which, despite your insurance, your race, your gender, or whatever reason, provides you a high-quality health service. And I'm proud of that. But despite this aspect, we need to consider many different aspects. And for this reason, a fair balance through which we should achieve the goal, which is a very challenging goal, shall start from the premise that, considering how complex this topic is, talking about mobility and transports, and considering also the availability of different technologies on which we can rely nowadays. So we talked about hydrogen, we talked about GNL for heavy transport. There are also other systems which may support the mobility market. So at this point, we really need to rely on a neutral technology, which is very important for new technologies nowadays, and which plays a key role for the mobility field today. So, of course, we want to achieve the electric goal in the cities or where it's actually needed. So the development of smart roads, the development of this context in big cities or in contexts where it is actually useful for public transports, for example, let's go ahead with the electrics, of course. And of course, I'm not talking about the very long terms in 300 years. No, I'm talking about a very few years when we will be able to rely on e-vehicles traveling on these preferential roads. And again, I'm talking about something real already. So now, the fact that Italy, also thanks to some businessmen, to some companies, to some multinational companies, has the opportunity to work and rely and invest on some of these technologies is a very positive aspect. So we have a huge opportunity here, and sometimes it's kind of underestimated because we can rely on very good universities, research centers, very advanced research centers. And the fact of relying on private companies that can use all these technologies with the support of public bodies, well, at that point, you really create a leading way which matches with the public interests, of course, because at that point, we really have an opportunity. We can really find a fuel. Well, I didn't want to mention the word fuel, the word in this context, but this is a fuel, a positive fuel, really giving a huge support, because the huge opportunities that Italy has nowadays, thanks to its companies and to the advanced research centers, as I said already, can lead the development. But we need someone to manage this process. And of course, this is a very important point as well, because otherwise, well, this is not only an Italian problem. This is something reasonable, because the company is relying on a specific know-how, doesn't want to share that with its competitors. But it's reasonable as well that when some initiatives, like the initiatives that have been mentioned already, developed by public research centers or by public universities, can be shared in order to achieve a sustainable development and in order to lead the way for companies as well, because it's good to have companies investing towards this direction. But of course, each company aims at its own business. So it's positive to go towards this direction, and the government, in this case, shall lead the way, but relying on this premise, which is that the technological neutrality should be our goal. So again, aiming at electrics without remembering that there will be also other opportunities on the short term. And of course, we need to consider, on the one hand, geopolitical interests, which of course play a very important role and cannot be underestimated, because we need to consider this aspect and to be fair about this aspect. And on the other side, we also need to make sure that nobody lags behind. So from an industrial and economic point of view, some parts of our country need to be supported. And as the Autostrade Italiane's representative was saying, if they are about to develop a charging station, one in the north, one in the center, one in the south of Italy, that's very good, and nobody shall be left behind from this point of view. The Italian government is investing for the high-speed transport towards Reggio Calabria, so that's very south of Italy, and from Reggio Calabria to the region Sicily, it's investing about 18 million euros. So that's very important investment, and it's just an example to explain and to show to the businessmen here, sitting here with us today, and it's very clear. It's a very clear example today. We still talk about the bridge on the bridge between the region Calabria and the region Sicily. So I think that being able now to do this huge investment in order to create this bridge will be a completely wrong investment, in my opinion, because today, let's say we start from Rimini now and we go to Reggio Calabria. Our goal is to reach Catania. We take the high-speed train, we reach Reggio Calabria, and let's say within 2026, June 2026, when there will be the high-speed train in Reggio Calabria, we are supposed to get out of the train, take a boat, and then take another high-speed train on the other side, on the other coast, in order to achieve our destination in Sicily. So if we are saying now that the goal is no longer the destination, but the journey, Well, thanks for having said that, because now it's more and more motivating for me. The fact that within September I need to go back to Reggio Calabria and to Messina and trying to convince people as well, because, well, in Reggio and in Messina, they all want that. I need to go back to Rome and be able to convince my colleagues that still do not understand the real aspect of this challenge. So this was just an example, of course, but I just wanted to say that today, developing and creating a charging station, giving the opportunity of relying on public means, but if at the same time you don't create a positive context in order to really exploit this opportunity by the millions of drivers, of people that today are driving their car, today it's going to be really useless. So let's, again, rely on technological neutrality. The government is investing a lot on electrics, and I hope in the future we'll be able to invest furthermore also on other systems, on other transport systems, always keeping in mind that at the same time there are also other topics. So, for example, the high-speed trains, or for example, in the region Lombardia, within 2023, so in a very short term, we will have the first hydrogen trains linking the region Lombardia to the Val Camonica. This will be an experiment, a test that we can show to all the European countries. And if we will be able to succeed in this test, if this test will actually succeed, providing very good results as we all hope, well, of course, we will be able to reduce the investments on the electricity, on electrics, and to rely on new mass transport systems. So, of course, this is the government goal, but this is also the European goal, and we should always keep that in mind. Thank you. I was aiming at giving again the floor to each one of you, but unfortunately we need to cope with the schedule, the time that we have available for our session. So we need to respect the timing of this meeting. But I really hope this is just the beginning of this discussion, of this debate, and I hope you can have the opportunity, we will have the opportunity to talk about this topic further in detail with the next sessions, because again, we talked about technological neutrality, and it's very important to renew the cars that are traveling in our roads, both private and public cars. So in order to do that, the goal will be to incentive and support people having older cars, and also we need to rely on the production and the manufacturing of new hybrid or e-cars. The goal is very clear, in my opinion, and this deserves the support of everybody and the hard work of all the subjects involved, so starting from institutions to the associations and private companies. The PNR, the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, is a very important opportunity that we have and that we cannot miss. We cannot make any mistake in this case in order to promote the development for the next few years. Of course, there are new skills to be considered, new qualifications to be taken into consideration for some jobs and aspects that were normal for years. Let's consider, for example, the maintenance of cars, how it will change in the future for the future. So also the assistance network and the mechanics, how they will change their work. As it's been mentioned, also the area of the manufacturing area in the region Emilia will be renewing its technology. So it's a very challenging topic for everybody, and I'm very pleased to have here the institutions starting a debate for a shared work and a work all together. Thank you to everybody, thanks to the meeting, and let me remind that some of these experiences are available to being visited in the hall C3 and C2. Let me remind also that the meeting over the last 40 years represented a gathering of exhibitions, debates, and sessions, very, very interesting, and this is supported also by the partnership of the volunteers that allow the organization of this meeting, but also by private people that can donate in order to contribute to this event. You will find the Donate Now point inside the exhibition area in order to support and contribute to the meeting. The meeting this year will invest these contributions to for a specific work. So thanks once again for your participation, and let's meet here again for the next session. Thank you very much.
Più investiamo nel presente, prima raggiungiamo il futuro. Questa è l'idea che ci spinge ogni giorno a muovere il nostro paese verso la ripresa, a dare a tutti nuovi percorsi da seguire, a usare l'innovazione per essere più liberi di crescere, a esportare la nostra eccellenza italiana nel mondo, ad anticipare i cambiamenti per costruire un domani più sostenibile con tutti voi. Perché il futuro è la nostra destinazione, solo se è un viaggio che facciamo insieme.
Dal passato. Decidi dove andare. Apri quella porta. Accendi il tuo motore. Allaccia la cintura. Stringiti al volante. E vieni via con me.
Restiamo nel presente, prima raggiungiamo il futuro. Questa è l'idea che ci spinge ogni giorno a muovere il nostro paese verso la ripresa, a dare a tutti nuovi percorsi da seguire, a usare l'innovazione per essere più liberi di crescere, a esportare la nostra eccellenza italiana nel mondo, ad anticipare i cambiamenti per costruire un domani più sostenibile con tutti voi. Perché il futuro è la nostra destinazione, solo se è un viaggio che facciamo insieme.
Ehi, impara dal passato. Decidi dove andare. Apri quella porta. Accendi il tuo motore. Allaccia la cintura. Stringiti al volante. E vieni via con me.